What is the apocalyptic mind? And how is the apocalyptic mind associated with unresolved lifestyle issues? Well, let me first preface this by saying the biggest issue that most people face is not having enough time and space to take care of their mental health. That's because we live in a high-powered thinkers and movers world. There's minimal allowance for people to process their life experiences. To stay on track with their daily routines, most people adopt the grin and bear it attitude of a stiff upper lip. Most people have no choice but to get up, get going and get on with it because their lifestyle demands it. Most people don't talk about their most vulnerable thoughts and feelings. They skirt around them because being vulnerable is seen as being weak, and being weak is inconvenient with a busy lifestyle that demands that you must stay strong. For most, vulnerability then soon becomes something they must override. People deny and distract themselves from those internal problems. And what better way to escape from those internal problems by burying oneself into a routine which is justified with the words of, "I just haven't got time to deal with this at the moment." The demanding lifestyle does, however, eventually fatigue the mind-body into a tired and fatigued state. And when we're feeling sick to death of it all, we have no other choice but to take a pause and breather. When it all becomes a bit too much, that's when we detach from those obligations and those overriding thoughts that say, "I must do this next." And that's when we subside to those underlying unresolved feelings. Feelings are the signals from our deeper intelligence. Good or bad feelings affirm whether we are on or off track with our true nature. However, it is in the busyness of thinking and doing that we ignore those inner signals. Ignoring those inner signals is where we carry on regardless with whatever next chore, project or stage of life that we must get to. And this is where we get stressed and overstep our ability to cope, which then leads to the inevitable fatigue. Fatigue itself is a lonely and unpleasant state of being to sit with, and a miserable place that we also want to escape from. When fatigued, we feel very weak, useless and disempowered, especially in comparison to how we usually are when we're on the go, go, go of a busy lifestyle. When feeling empowered and getting stuff done. When feeling fatigued, however, the body wants to rest, and yet it is the restless mind that is anxious to get back to the busyness again. The mistake that we all make is to get back on the lifestyle horse way too soon, way before we've fully recovered, and never to address the underlying feelings and their correlating lifestyle issues that are begging for reconciliation. And what we don't reconcile with, we stockpile as a karmic debt. We start to accumulate recurring pains as we go round and around the karmic wheel, as we turn up for the highs and then crash down to the lows because we are not processing our life experiences. Those who fail to address their karmic debt voluntarily are forced to deal with it involuntarily. That's because each time we deny parts of the self that need our attention and care, we harvest the unresolved negative energy within. Negative energy amasses within the mind-body as a consistent source of internal distress. And when that internal distress reaches a critical mass, i.e., the strong feelings of discontent are equal to the dominant thoughts that usually want to override that feeling, the mind and body is at war with itself. War happens whenever the immovable object meets the unstoppable force. In the context of the mind-body, this means the internal environment is a hostile place of opposed thoughts and feelings that are warring with each other. Where there are two opposed forces of, I feel this way, but I think I should be doing this instead. And these different forces are fighting towards different means. And we all experience acute distress to varying degrees. Distress is where the ambiguous mind is jarred with a painful anxiety and one cannot get a coherent grip on reality. One is marred with this irreconcilable sorrow that comes from not being able to change the way one feels. The torment ebbs and flows, but somehow we move on, muddling through to the next chore or chapter of our life. And to keep functioning within a rigid lifestyle of demands and obligations, people will conveniently repress their distress out of their mind, going with that suck it up, get on with it, and life must go on mentality. Pushing through the tough times, however, does not mitigate the anxiety of distress. Unprocessed distress grows in size and gives birth to the bastard child of despair. Despair is the inner karmic debt where we haven't dealt with our emotional issues, where we haven't acknowledged, accepted, resolved, and forgiven the debt. The inner anguish is lingering on because we carry it on with us. We are still reliving the karmic nightmare of its unresolved energy. When persistently repressing negativity through the process of mind over matter, we then cultivate a psychosomatic condition. Psychosomatic is a medical label, and the word itself means psycho, mind, somatic, body, whereby the state of mind affects the state of body. The mind-body correlation is powerful. The quality of what we think is relevant to the energetic state of the body. If we think positively, the energy is uplifted. If we think negatively, the energy is downbeat. Negative thoughts and feelings are a dark, acidic, and astringent energy which in of themselves makes the body weak, slow, heavy, unpleasant, irritable, and stressed. Throughout the years of brushing negativity aside, that unresolved energy then mutates within, growing more darker, volatile, intense, and reactive. And when using stimulants and soothers to suppress our bad feelings and keep the negativity at bay, it's like throwing new coal into a burning fire that has no outlet to release its steam. The internal dark flame, it roars with ferocity and grows in pressure. Essentially, repression of negative energy is to construct a ticking psychological time bomb, where what we repress does eventually find a way to express. You see, the growing pressure of negative energy within finds a weak spot in the body's manifold. The body itself then soon becomes the outlet for negative energy. Repressed negative emotions will reach a pressure point of no return, and then are expressed as symptomatic illnesses, ailments, and dis-ease within specific organs and body parts. Organs being the prime hotspots. That's because organs naturally process vibrational energy. The pressurized energy also percolates to the top and agitates the mind with a subtle to severe neurosis. Neurosis makes it difficult for the mind to function optimally and consistently. We see this with hyper-obsessive, hyper-sensitive, hyper-vigilant, hyper-anxious, and hyper-conscientious styles of behaviour. The saturation point of negative energy is then reached when the psyche preserves a clamour of discontent. The miserable mind is one that becomes a karmic cesspool of regurgitating negativity. There is a toxic sludge of cancerous thoughts and emotions that are rapidly spreading throughout the psychoneurological fabric of being, and they putrefy into a state of self-loathing. Self-loathing is the psychosomatic endgame where there is intense dislike and even hatred for the self. You see, that which is dark is avoidant of the light. As within, so without, the darker mind, it peers through a sinister perspective and starts to pollute reality with thoughts that disagree with anything that represents good vibes, and projecting darkness subsequently causes more problematic experiences with reality. When we think and act negatively, this manifests a negative interaction with reality, and that feedback loop is what keeps the bad karma aflame. I refer to this bad karma in a tutorial later as the self self-reinforcing negative feedback loop, where neuroticism has become the trait that perpetuates negative consequences. Also, when the dark energy within has surpassed its critical mass, the willpower is too weak to repress its load, and the stimulants and soothers with their boost and crash effects that we usually rely upon to get some comforting relief does little except to aggravate the existing darkness, and thus the ticking time bomb within starts to explode in slow motion. What was zipped up all those years gradually starts to come undone. Coming undone is a term that defines a mind that erupts mercilessly with the affliction of troubled thoughts and feelings. The individual has lost self-control. The mind fluctuates between antipathetic, indecisive and nonsensical states. The guitar, it gently weeps and it screams, pulsating between high and low mood swings. The mind is short-tempered and abrasive, then solemn and unresponsive, ranging in tones of intensity and variability, with one lost in the maddening storm of its cognitive Pandora, flitting between a muttering madness to a melancholy muppet. The unwelcome grievance that seeps out of every orifice is a mental despotism that I refer to as the apocalyptic mind. Apocalyptic means revelation, the uncovering of. Undergoing a mental apocalypse means that the artificial characteristics of the mask are falling apart and the unresolved aspects of one's inward person is exploding through the cracks of the fragile facade. And listen, I myself have looked into the mirror and peered through the cracks to see how the little minnow had become a monster. Each time I did catch a brief glimpse of the grotesquerie of who I'd become, I would do my best with self-denial to play down its monstrosity. I would patch up that disfigured mask with a far-fetched delusion that I was still that pretty little wonder boy. However, patch-up jobs, they never do last. Striking back with vengeance, the apocalyptic mind drives one totally insane in the membrane. The thinking unreels into a state of bewilderment, where the unstable mind is grasping at the straws of an untenable reality. One becomes distraught, disturbed and distrustful of the contents of their own mind, which executes integrity and kills confidence with the deadly accuracy of expert marksmanship. Characteristically speaking, there is a rip in the veil of hypocrisy between the inward person and the outward persona. Everything has come to a disturbing light. The incongruency and deceitfulness of how one has behaved is obvious and unnerving. There is this unrelenting sense of fraudulence that strikes the conscience that one can't escape. The sense of ugliness, wrongfulness, incompetency, immoralities and shortcomings. There is no other choice than to be straight up and admit, I've screwed up. We tend to screw up because we've got to screw loose, where the unhinged mind has peeled away from its inability to function properly. It has become warped with contortions. And I do speak from experience. I myself have once stood on the precipice of my sanity, not knowing which way I would go, feeling vexed and verged by this visceral blot, wondering, will it ever pass? I've also descended into the vacuum of desolate unfathomableness, taking a hard landing inwards to find myself collapsed into that lifeless space that we all call depression, where the primal scream has given way to that silent echo. Depression is the joyless, emotionless void that we all fall into when reality itself has become unbearable. All the screws are falling out and we just can't keep it together. When depressed, the willpower is deflated and there's nothing worth fighting for. The will to live is so crippled that it's a struggle just to get out of bed and face another day of hardship. Well, what can I say? Bad karma, she is a cold, heartless bitch. Depression can be this beautiful gift in disguise if one can emerge from its deathly clutches to begin afresh with activities that express one's true nature. If, however, you bounce back from a depression only to reconstruct a new fictitious mask for the purpose of getting back into that crazy game out there, then one has squandered that gift. The crazy game is to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. Even so, we can easily clamber back onto a new carousel that looks like a different ride with a better soundtrack, and yet at some point down the track, it has the same buckaroo effect that leaves one face down in the mud and eating dirt again. And of course, there are some of us that have had enough of the crazy game and would rather just sit it out. However, the life to dream of eludes those who continue to live in a state of blue funk, never to get back on the horse. Their life becomes this prolonged desert, a slow kill, this place for the walking dead, where one is cursed with a deadly dose of hopelessness, where the scorching sun beats them down into a hell on earth, and that is no way to live. It is, however, when we reach a point of feeling sick and tired of being sick and tired that heralds the dawn of novelty, and with it, a new desire to find our way out of the darkness. Trying to find the way out of a dark storm is difficult when there is no light in sight. Not so difficult as the first hurdle and the greatest dilemma that one faces when coming back from a place of depression, and that is that a depressed mind must climb out of its own depression and begin to refunction from a state of dysfunction. As you can imagine, it is not easy learning how to walk with broken legs, but walk we must, and if we can't walk, we crawl until we can, because if life does not go on, life goes under, just like my friend's life, Stuart. However, the instantaneous breakthrough that transcends the heavy darkness of the apocalyptic mind is to realize that you are not the thoughts that you think. It is the ability to separate the conscious awareness of the self, that is really you, from the thoughts of self, because it is the thoughts that carry the dark baggage. We only feel the heavy burden of our darkened thoughts, and when we hold on to them, believing that they are real, that's when they drag us down. And I know that your thoughts can seem so real. They are, after all, a real experience, and yet they are just an experience. They are not you. Your thoughts are learned words, your vocabulary in which to associate with and define the experience of reality. They are not you. You are not the ill thoughts, the frustrations, the misery, the anxiety, or the depression. The moment you realize that you are the conscious awareness, the entity and observer that is separate to your thoughts, then you can separate from your thoughts, liberating from the thoughts that pull you down or stress you out. Liberation from dark thoughts does not mean that they stop. From the standpoint of being conscious awareness, we are still observant and recipient to the unresolved thoughts and feelings within. So, the way out of apocalyptic damnation is through salvation, which incorporates the process of resolution, followed by absolution and redemption, where oneself is transmuted from neurosis into a state of atonement. Atonement means to be at one with mind. The atonement mind is the cure for the apocalyptic mind, where one has rekindled a love affair with the human in the mirror, embracing every fibre of your beingness with a loving, compassionate care. The atonement mind is the prize of mental wealth. Now let's discuss the next topic, called the game of two sides. I'll start by saying that falling in love with life itself is a daily practice. The practice of appreciation, the practice of nurturing that which elicits joy, the practice of not falling into the unconscious trap of ill thinking, the practice of disassociating from that which elicits some type of suffering. Because suffering arises when we hold on to a healthy desire that says we must be, have, or do something. And with that unhealthy desire, there is an expectation and yearning for that something to be better. We have developed this lopsided relationship with the object of our desire, where it has become this insatiable appetite, this attachment, fixation or addiction, to a point the pursuance of what we desire is actually painful. We can feel pained with not having what we desire. We can feel pained in the efforts, frustrations, disappointments and setbacks in trying to accrue what we desire. We will always feel pain by the thoughts and efforts of trying to obtain, hold on to, influence and securitize our desires. So let's consider these two very simple examples of an unhealthy desire. We could have this preference for a person to behave a certain way, or we could have this determination to complete a work project within a certain budget. It is when what we desire does not perform as requested or expected that we feel the pains of frustration and disappointment. When our desires are not met, we feel the painful void of not getting what we desire. The desire to have something that we value does elicit a void of not having that value, to which only the value that we desire can satisfy its counterpart void. In the absence of the value that we desire, we suffer from the void of lack, of less, of feeling without, of unworthiness or powerlessness even, until such time as the value we desire has arrived and satisfied its void. We can also feel pain by impatience as we deal with the delays and unexpected problems that are encountered along the way of procuring our desires. As a species in this modern world where we've become expectant and familiar with having what we desire, like today, this morning, right now, anything that will take an extended amount of time to achieve can feel too far away, too relentless to get, too unsatisfactory to live in the now without it. And even when our desires do arrive, just as expected, we are then lulled into the false sense of comfort and security that they are permanent and durable. Nothing is permanent and durable in a changeable reality. The long and short of it is this: that changes are often outside of our control. They can also happen unexpectedly and sometimes happen with an almighty shock. So if you or I are unable to accept change and adapt accordingly, those expectations that we have for reality to remain exactly as we desire it will be met with immense suffering. The suffering of longing for what is not. The irrefutable fact is, this reality is transient, temporal, and often fleeting. People, possessions, places, predicaments, and even what we define as my problems, over an indefinable amount of time, will change in both form and quality. Reality in every conceivable way will either get worse, better, or different over time. Even our personal desires will change as we transition into the different phases of life, because psychologically, biologically, physiologically, the way we think, feel and look right now will change within the next 10 years, unless of course you happen to be drinking from the fountain of youth. The changing of nature does conform with the immutable laws of balance. Balance is a game of two sides. Reality itself is dualistic. We do live within a dualistic reality that has polarity, which means every experience has two sides with opposite poles. For example, the human being has both masculine and feminine energy. Earth has daytime and nighttime. Temperature is both hot and cold. Life begins with birth and ends with death. We experience both motion and rest. These two sides are the yin and yang, the opposite sides of the same one experience. Human consciousness is also both negatively and positively charged. We are able to shift from one end of the emotional spectrum to the other. It is only, however, when we have committed with a strong desire for a certain outcome to happen that we've driven this psychological stake in the ground that says it must be this one way in order for me to be satisfied. Doing so, we actually violate the law of balance. We have stopped flowing between the balance of all possibilities and instead have pinned ourselves to the extremity of one way. And nature will always find a way to correct itself. That's because nobody escapes the law of balance. The pendulum will always swing across both sides in equal measure. If we hold on to one specific way, one specific view, one specific emotion, one specific outcome, one specific desire for too long, we will experience the inner and outer resistance holding on to that position. But then, the energy that it takes to hold on will soon wane as we grow tired and stressed, which will then be corrected. Eventually, we will let go of holding on, we will drop the ball, and we will experience a polar shift in some way, shape or form. To negate this fact is to deny nature. To keep holding on to something like it is a matter of life and death will be the death of you, because you can't fully live and flow freely with and through life when you've nailed yourself to a cross. We will always deny nature when trying to maintain a fixed position within nature's dualistic flow. Besides, the moment we do hold on to a position and make a finite conclusion about something or someone and believing that we are right and justified, we have indeed acted with contradiction. That's because there is always a rational counter-argument and counter-position that has equal validity to everything that we think and do. You see, life is this playful game of opposing sides, where oppositions jostle to validate their ideologies, methods and requests. Whenever we resist opposition, we experience the tension of division as we defend and assert our side of that division. We get caught up in needing to prove ourselves right. With that comes the need to disprove the other side, which always leads to the pains of conflict. If, however, you are willing to accommodate the perspective of both sides of the game in any arena of life, then harmony will follow. Harmony does require one to hold on to two contradictory thoughts simultaneously, flowing into situations with equanimity, at ease, poised and composed. The end of all suffering, therefore, is to simply find balance in everything you perceive, think and do. When you counterpoise your perspective with a dual quality, you can harmonise your life experience more easily and readily. With the dual perspective that you will master in this program, you will come to know that there is a drawback in every benefit and a benefit in every drawback. You will come to see the good within the bad and the bad within the good. With a dual perspective, you can neutralise lopsided thoughts that delude you into thinking things are bad or that things will be so much better once you have the things you desire. I have designed the Mind Games program to assist you with identifying the unhealthy relationships that you have with the fixtures, positions, people and the outcomes in your life. And then, with powerful psychological tools, you will be able to uncouple from any suffering, so that you can progress forward with peaceful harmony. Progressing forward with peaceful harmony is the skillful ability to go after what you want with passion, enthusiasm and determination, yet remain impartial over the result. It is the ability to pursue what you desire without painful attachment. It is the ability to cherish the things you love, and when the time comes, to let them go with grace and dignity. Here is the fortune cracker version of that aforementioned advice. Suffering ends and peaceful harmony begins for those who can desire and not desire at the same time, whilst in pursuance of what they truly desire.